Well, hello, howdy, and welcome back to Twangmeister Studios. I'm Dan Wesley, and this is part 2 in our series Mixing a Country Song, brought to you by Mixed by the Twangmeister. If you would like to have your songs mixed by the Twangmeister, check out all the details below, and we can sort that out for you. Now then, in the first video, which if you haven't seen yet, go ahead and have a look at that first. It's okay, we'll wait. Sorted? Okay, brilliant. In the first video, you will have seen me introduce you to the artist, the songwriter, the song itself. We had a little look at how the template is set up, really barely scratching the surface, but more of that will get revealed as time goes by. And we had a look at the drums and did a little bit of a cleanup on the toms. If you remember, what we had was a horrible low rumbly noise, which we got rid of by editing the toms. Let me remind you, before we did our edit, the drums sounded like this. And then after, I know, it's almost like magic, isn't it? Okay, so that's cleaning up the toms and giving us a good starting point. So let's get cracking, shall we? And start with some proper mixing. And we're going to start at the very beginning, as you might expect, with our kick drum. I'll tell you what, would you like to just have a listen to it on its own, see what it sounds like? So there you go, a reasonable sounding recording of the kick drum. A bit of snare spill there, nothing too drastic. So what am I going to do first of all? Well, to start off with, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to duplicate this particular track. And so we have a copy. Let's just expand that so we can see we have 2 copies. So basically the same track entirely at the moment. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to solo one of them, because the plan is I'm going to leave one of them completely unaffected, but the other one we are going to work on, try and get some more punch and bite in it, and possibly even gate out that snare, have a bit of a little bit of reverb as well to help it sound like it's part of the room, because it's sounding quite dry to start off with. So let's go to our kick, and I suppose we really ought to name these differently, because we have kick, that's the original kick, and what shall we call this one? Just call it kick 2, for want of a better name. And what are we going to do? Right, to start off with, I'm going to bring in my trusty Neve 88RS. Just type 88 in there. That's all we need to do. And this is, of course, a mono track. So we're going to drag a mono instance of this onto this track. So what do we have here? This is a channel strip from the well-renowned Neve 88 console, one of the nicest sounding consoles in history, and we are going to shape this kick drum to our taste. So let's carry on, have another little listen. Now first off, I'm going to want to gate this kick to get rid of the snare, because we're going to, like I say, we're going to add a bit of effects on it, and I want to have it just affecting the kick itself and nothing else. So let us come over here to our plugins, and you will notice that we have our Neve 88RS, which I can bring up here on my C4 and start off. Let's give ourselves a little loop to play with. Okay, nothing playing. So we're going to start off by turning on the gate and then playing around with the threshold and release, what have you, to get exactly what we want. At the moment, obviously, it's completely gating out the kick, so let's reduce the threshold. And the release. Okay, I think we've got what we're after there. We're going to have a little bit of compression. Let's turn on the compressor. Now, if you watch the little red lights down the bottom here, this will show us the amount of compression that we're getting. Once again, we need to play with the threshold to get that. And that'll do us there. Now, in terms of the EQ, let's turn on the EQ. We're going to start at the bottom and work our way up. I'm going to take this down to about 60 is always a nice place to enhance. Turn that up so you can hear what that does there. This is a good point maybe to remind you that if you're listening on little earbuds or laptop speakers or even on your phone, you're not going to hear this. So listen on some proper headphones or a really good pair of monitor speakers and you'll hear what we're doing. So let's turn that up to taste. Just adding a little bit of weight, a bit of thud down there, which is what we're after. Okay, what else do we need to do here? Okay, so what have I done here? I have given us a little bit of oomph at the bottom end, which you can see here. We've dipped a bit out in that muddy area and boosted a little in the high mids and a little bit of top. So let me listen with and without the EQ. This is with, without, and with. And we're also getting a little bit of gain there. So what we need to do is to check our levels. So this nice big red button here is our on-off switch for this particular plugin. So with it off, let's have a look and see where our lights are shining here. Okay, and then with it on, yeah, that's pretty much in the same ballpark. Okay, we're happy with that. Right, so what I'm going to do, what I want to do is to, the reason I've done this on a separate track, a couple of reasons. I'm going to blend it with the original. So the original, of course, still has that little bit of snare spill, and it keeps a bit more of the realism instead of just having a manipulated kick. So we've got the balance of the two. But I need to send to the reverb, because if we listen again now to our drums in total, There you go, I can see we've added some nice weight and punch to our kick, but it's a little bit dry. I want to have a little bit of ambience on this, so we need to send. So let me open up our sends. You'll see we can have them display or not. Set this up a little bit so we can see more of this. So I'm going to add a send, and you'll notice, first of all, you'll notice I have a channel here already for our kick verb, which is called kick verb. So that's what we're going to send to. So I'm going to add that send here, and it's going to go to kick verb there. So we're sending to the kick verb from this affected kick. So what we need to do now then, on our kick verb channel, we need to add something appropriate, and I think what we're going to go for is the RVerb. Mono, stereo, what do you reckon? We'll stick a stereo one on, just for a laugh. Okay, on the kick verb, so we're going to stick that up there. What does that sound like? Probably not pretty out of the box. Okay, so let's find something more appropriate. And what do we like on the kick? Sometimes you can be dazzled by just too many presets, can't you? I don't want to. No, there's something in medium nightclub. I'm going to try that. See what that sounds like. Without. Turn it down and bring in the amount that we want. In contact with the rest of the drums. Just helps it to sound more part of the kit. And like I say, I'm going to blend these two kicks together. So if you remember, this is our unaffected kick. And here is our affected one. So let's blend in the original. Okay, now all these tracks, all these kick tracks, these two kicks and the kick verb are all going here to this kick aux. And what I'm after at this stage of the mix is I want to have this hitting around -6. Okay, so let's take it down slightly. Okay, it's in the right area. So that is our kick. I say that is our kick, of course, that is our kick for now. It'll be the same with all the drums. We're going to get a basic mix going on all these drums and then bring everything else in. Once everything else is in and we've mixed everything else, I have no doubt there'll be plenty of tweaking that needs to be done to the drums later on. So that's not the final answer. Final answer, no. Okay, so let's move on to our snare. Now you'll notice once again we have just the one snare track. Now this is going to be quite involved in a sense because of the nature of this track. Let me first of all play you from the beginning. This is the intro. Listen to the first half of the intro, and then listen to the second half of the intro. And let's just solo the snare. Okay. And listen to this snare. What's he doing? Into the verse. Okay, so what you no doubt will have noticed is that in the verse he is playing just the snare. That's all he's doing with his sticks, and he's hitting on the 2 and the 4, the backbeat, the big hits, but between them we've got some little what I'm going to call ghost notes. So it's like a dicka-dacka, 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 and those little things, those little dicka-dacka, are what you might possibly normally hear from the hi-hat, for example. But this is a big part of the groove of this song. So in both the verses, he's doing this, but in the chorus, if we go to a chorus, let's head over here. Turn off loop would help. Come over here. Into the chorus. As you can hear, he has switched to cymbals and hats, and he does that all through the chorus. But in the verses, he's just playing the snare. Now then, in the context of the whole song, let's go back to our verse. Listen to this snare again. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in here on this snare, so we can really get a good look at it. And you will see how I've made it extra big so that we can really see the difference. How much bigger the 2 and the 4 are to the little ghost notes in between. And those ghost notes, like I say, they're a vital part of the groove of this track, and I don't want them to be lost and missing. Let's listen to the whole of the drums and listen out for those ghost notes. Okay, fine. When you hear like that, everything sounds fine. Now let's bring in all the instruments and now have a listen out for those ghost notes.
Sitting there, I liked the way she looked, like butter wouldn't melt in her mouth.
It's almost like, where have they gone? Where are they? Now, I really want to be able to hear those. So, I have a number of options. How am I going to achieve this? How am I going to bring up the level of these ghost notes? Well, it's not a case of turning the snare up, is it? Because then we're going to have the 2 and the 4 are going to be too loud. So there's a couple of options, and you'll notice I already have here this snare ghost track for this purpose, set up exactly for this purpose. What I could do is I could copy the snare track down onto the snare ghost track, and then with some heavy compression really clamp down on the big hits, leaving the others alone, thereby reducing the difference and making them louder in comparison to the big snare hits. I could do that, but I'm not going to do that. Why am I not going to do that? It's a shame I'm not going to do that, because that's quite easy and quite quick. But the problem is, when you do that, the big snare hits, yes, they get squashed. The sound of those snare hits, obviously, is going to be significantly different. Now, when we get to the chorus, this is the last thing I want to do. I don't want to bring up the cymbals and the hi-hats, because they're already too loud. There's already too much spill into that snare mic from the hats and the cymbals in the choruses. So I'm going to have to treat the verses and the choruses differently. Now, if I just applied this compression to the verses, thereby bringing up the level of the ghost notes, not having that compression in the chorus, what would actually then happen is, once we transition from the verse into the chorus, the snare sound would completely change. And we don't want that, because that would be crazy. So I'm going to have to do something that involves a little bit more editing. Okay, so let me show you what I'm going to do. You will notice here that the way it's set up in my template, here is our snare track. You'll notice I have a send set up to the snare ghost track. Okay, with me so far? So let us have a look at the automation lane for that send. So if I open up the automation lane for the snare track, stretch it out a bit, you'll notice it's currently showing the volume automation. So let's change that to snare ghost send level. So this is the send level for our that we are sending to this track, and you can see at the moment it's turned all the way down. So what am I going to do? Well, let me go to the intro to start off with, because you'll notice we have the ghost notes for the first part of the intro and then not the second part. Sorry, let me solo just the drums. In fact, let's solo just the snare. Okay. I mean, you can already hear how much quieter those ghost notes are compared to the big snare hits. So how are we going to achieve what we are going to achieve? Well, if you notice, let's just zoom in a little bit more. Here are the big snare hits. Bang, bang, bang. Okay, and in between are the 3 ghost notes. You can see the second and third one nice and easily. The first one, though, is a little bit obscured by the tail of the big snare hit, so you kind of have to guess a little bit as to where it is. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to create some nodes here, and before this next snare hit, same again, and then what we're going to do is to raise this up here. In fact, no, I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to do it the other way around. We're going to have this all the way up first. So let us go to our send and let's take it all the way up to 0. So what I'm going to do actually is, instead of turning up the ghost notes, we've now turned up the whole thing, and we're going to duck the big snares. And we're going to do so like this. Let me show you. So we're going to do this, and then we're going to assume that our there's 2 and 3. 1's going to be around here, isn't it? So we're going to do this, and then we're just going to get rid of that, turn that all the way down. Same with the next big snare hit. Okay, and about there. I'm going to turn that one. So here's what we've done. We are sending to the snare ghost track just the ghost notes and not the big snare hit. So let's just have a listen before I carry on and do the rest of this. Let's have a listen to what that sounds like. So I'm going to go to the snare ghost track, and I'm going to turn on the input monitor, and I'm going to solo it. Let's just change that send to pre-fade. So that's, in effect, that is what is being sent to our snare ghost track. Listen again. Okay, you get what we're doing here. Okay, now I'm going to go and do that to the 2 verses as well, and you can fast forward. Okay, welcome back. Here you can see I have done the intro and verse 1 and verse 2. And what have I done? I have automated the send to the snare ghost track so that it just sends the ghost notes in between the big hits, which sounds like this. Okay, so let's now see what and why we have done that. So I'm going to unsolo this now. We can close that up and unmute that little baby there. So here we have our ghost note. I'm going to turn the ghost notes all the way down a moment. So let us solo these two. This is the snare by itself, and then I'm going to raise the ghost note fader. Okay, slowly raise the ghost note fader. So you'll see if I raise it too far, we get a kind of a pumping effect. We just need to do enough to make it appear in the track. But let's have a listen to it in context with the drums. Bring it in. Okay, just enough there. Okay, and then what about with the whole song? So this is with no ghost note snare, a ghost note track, fader all the way down. It would help. Let's go back to the verse.
When I first saw her sitting there, I liked the way she...
Notice how you can barely even hear the ghost notes there. Let's raise them up.
The way she looked like butter wouldn't melt in her mouth. Now 6 months down the line, she's messing with...
There you are, and our groove is back. Nice. So that's why we have done that. Okay, now our job is getting the snare to sound awesome. And what I'm going to do, first of all, is I'm going to close the sends just to get them out of the way. We don't need to see them. Gives us a bit more real estate. And once again, I'm going to bring, excuse me, our Neve 88 RS channel strip in here onto our snare track. Oh yes, just to mention, as you can see, let me bring this across here. As you can see, just to the left of the snare track itself, which is here, we have a couple of other tracks which are part of my template. This is set up for a trigger, in case we want to trigger any samples to help the drums out, help the snare drum out in the song. That's why they are there. We have a MIDI track and we also have an instrument track with addictive drums loaded on there. But we're going to try and get away with not using any of that. We're going to try and just mix the drum kit as it is, because of course in the old days they didn't have sample triggers. So what are we going to do with our snare? Let's solo the thing up again and have a listen. Okay, so if you listen, particularly in the chorus there, we have a heck of a lot of spill into the microphone from the cymbals. And I think the first thing I want to do is to get rid of that. And we're going to do that once again, turning on our gate. And let's set that up. Okay, that'll do. For the gates, you see we've got rid of all, well, listen to it with and without. With the gate, without. Just make sure we're not too cutting that snare off too much. Increase the release a little bit more. Okay, happy with that. So we're going to compress, turn on the compressor. Ourselves back to the beginning of the song. Play it again, Sam. Okay, now I think we need a bit to beef up the low end here on this particular snare. Okay, now what you will see is we have drastically increased or massively boosted the volume of this snare. So once again, let's turn it off and see where the level was before. Just about jumping into the orange. Let's turn the output down. With the rest of the drums.
Stop me, please.
Okay, so what do I want to do here in terms of, now I've gated the snare, obviously, but I want to just add a little bit of space, a little bit of ambiance once again. And we're going to, once again, reach for our trusty RVerb. Okay, I'm going to stick that on here on our snare verb track. And we're going to have a little listen to what we think and choose an appropriate setting. You'll see we actually don't have a send there. We're only sending to the snare ghost, so let's add that send to the snare verb. I don't know why that disappeared. Where are we? There we are. We have now a send to the snare verb, so it sounds like this. Listen to it in context. Okay, and once again, all the snare tracks, all these that are this slightly reddish pigment, these are all the snare tracks. They all go to our snare orgs track, org snare as it's called there. And once again, what I want to do is to have this hitting around about -6, just like we had the orgs kick track. So. Okay, that will do for now. Close the reverb. And so you'll hear we've added a little bit of space around the snare. Let's just blend it to the amount we want. Turn it down and then bring it in. No snare verb. Okay, and then in context with the whole song.
Please. I couldn't see the wood for the tree. I don't want no sense.
Okay, that will do for now. So for now, we have our kick and we have our snare mixed, certainly for now. Like I say, we may come back and tweak later when we've got everything else in. That's it for this particular video. Join me again in part 3 when we shall get the rest of the drums mixed. See you then.